Hi, my name is Bumi Hazan, but I go by Bandit Haze in the online space, and I am the host of the Uncivilized Arts podcast. And because of some of the things that we discuss in this particular episode, I thought it'd be best to issue a content warning. Some of the things we discuss include, but are not limited to, violence and sexual assault. These are things that we discuss mainly in the Can Games Go Too Far section of the podcast, so if you'd rather skip that part, I understand. But if you do listen and or watch, then please let me know what you think or any thoughts you have on that, whether in the comment section or if you want to tweet at me at uncivilisedArt, and we could discuss from there. Thank you and enjoy the show. This is the next episode, or what about next, but a episode of Uncivilized Art Podcast, Geek and Internet Culture Podcast. I'm back again with Sweet Bundy, and we're going to be talking about a few things. The main thing we're going to be talking about today is, can games go too far? Is it possible for games, or I guess maybe just art in general, but we're going to maybe focus a bit more on games, but can they go too far? Is there a point where it's like, actually, you've kind of crossed a boundary? Because I've had some experiences that definitely challenged my opinions on that. But before we get to that, we're going to talk a little bit about Lizzo, because I think that's an interesting thing, the whole Lizzo and Grrrls and changing the lyrics. Because I feel like that's a really fascinating thing when it comes to how that reflects, or how it what it potentially means to creativity and artist consumer relationships. But before we do that, Mr. Sweet Bundy, how is you, man? How you doing today? How you been? What you been doing? What's been keeping you busy? What up,
Man,
homie?
I'm doing good. I'm just glad to be here again. I've been watching shows like crazy. Uh, The Boys just finished
Okay, yeah,
season
yeah,
three
yeah.
finale.
That's been getting a lot of buzz online.
It's so good. I mean, the finale, I got some opinions on it, but right now is not the time to go ahead and share them. But definitely watch it. I highly recommend it to people, unless you're not into graphic stuff. If you're not into blood, guts, and all that, don't watch it.
Okay.
But if you are, if you're okay with it, watch that shit. It's really good. The Boys, and if not The Boys, then I recommend Barry. Barry is a very good show with Bill Hader.
Oh yeah,
They
y'all know.
just finished 3 seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Napoleon
I really
Dynamite.
hope. What happened?
Napoleon Dynamite. Bill Hader. Oh, am I thinking of somebody else?
No, you're thinking about somebody else. I think.
Okay, never mind then. Never
I
mind.
might be wrong. So but I don't remember him in that movie, or maybe he directed it. I don't know, but Bill Hader, he's from SNL,
Oh
Saturday
wait, yeah,
Night
yeah, no,
Live.
somebody else. Yeah, yeah, never mind,
Yeah,
never mind.
yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely watch Barry. Barry is a great, great show. I yeah, I just been watching shows and a couple of movies. I saw Thor and Love and Thunder
Mm.
recently. It's pretty good. Pretty good. That's all I gotta say about it. There are some complaints about it being a little too jokey, and I kind of agree. But I don't want a serious Thor. But again, I'm not here to give a movie review. I'm just
Yeah.
recommending some
We'll
stuff, and
save
that's
the
it.
spoilers for another time, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I ain't seen that one yet, but yeah, that's I've seen that's been getting some very polarizing opinions. Some people seem to love it, some people seem to hate it. My little brother saw it; he enjoyed it, but yeah, I haven't seen it yet, so I'd have to try and get to that. I've been slacking when it comes to Marvel lately. Like I swear, I mean, I'm up to date with Marvel stuff. Well, apart from Thor, rather, let me say it properly. So that's the only one I haven't seen yet, but I'm not only just come out. But you gotta understand, like, I was usually the guy that was like on it. You know what I mean? Like on it, right? But lately, it's just like, I've either seen it at the cinema maybe like a week, 2 weeks after it's coming out, or catching it on Disney Plus. So yeah, I've been slacking a little bit, but I'm still caught up, just not with Thor.
I'm actually not caught up with Miss Marvel. I only watched the first 2 episodes. I might go ahead and finish it because I do like the character.
Hmm.
As far as the show goes, I like her father. I like that actor. He puts his
Yeah, yeah,
all
yeah.
into it. Of course, the actress that plays Miss Marvel, I'm very excited for her to join the MCU.
Hmm.
She seems enthusiastic, a great actress, of course, and also very knowledgeable about the comics. So when you have people like that involved with the movies, you can only get the best out of them. That's
Mm.
it.
No, for sure. I mean, I've been watching Ms. Marvel. In fact, wait a minute. What day does it say? Wednesday. Okay, no, I haven't watched the latest episode yet, so I need to catch that up soon. I watch it after we do this podcast. But yeah, I've been enjoying Ms. Marvel actually, and what I thought was kind of interesting is that it's very much the type of show that I wouldn't normally watch. Because it's very much a teen girl drama type show, so I wouldn't normally check in for something like that. But because it is part of the MCU and part of this whole big story, that's why I'm watching it, right? And so I kind of was thinking that Marvel has found the way to get people to watch things. I'm not sure they're the only ones who do it, but it's certainly, for me, it's found a way that to get people to watch things that they might not normally watch and perhaps even get something out of it. Because even though I recognize it's not a show being made for me, I can still appreciate it for what it is. And, the actress, Iman Vellani. I'm sorry if I got that wrong, but the main actress. That is like her first professional acting gig, right? And I actually think it's a good idea to get somebody who isn't as experienced an actress because it means that she really nails the awkward teen perfectly. I feel like a more experienced actress, might not quite get those bits because they'd be too into the acting mode, right?
Yeah,
Whereas someone who's
I can
maybe
see
not
that.
as experienced an actress, they just naturally do what they're doing and they nail in that kind of awkward teen, which is what they're going for. So yeah, I feel like they've done really, really well with it. And also I like the fact that they've kind of found the way to introduce these sort of historical learning moments as well. And yeah, it can feel a bit, in your face and blazing at times, but for the most part, it's kind of natural and fits in with the show. So you're not kind of sitting there thinking that you're just watching some, 45-minute history class. Like it does feel kind of natural to the show when they get into the more historical elements about the partition and how that affected people, families, and even like to this day, like families are affected by it. So it's like, okay, that's something that I didn't know, and now having awareness of, so it's really cool.
Yeah, and also I would like to compliment. And mind you, I only seen the first 2 episodes, but I was very impressed by, how creative some of the camera work was, the artistic parts of the show, like the graffiti on the walls. Also, the way how they implement showing text, they did it differently. They did something new.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, before a character would just look at the phone and then they'll show the phone screen and then they started to show the chat bubbles. And now Miss Marvel, I feel like, was the first, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the first to actually show text by using the environment. So that was, that blew my mind a little bit.
Mm. Also like about that as well. I'm pretty sure they did this in Miss Marvel. At least I seem to like remember them doing it in Miss Marvel. Maybe my memory's faded, but whether it's in Miss Marvel or any show that's ever done this, it's not an uncommon thing. But I feel it was really cool when people when you see it when they do show the text as they're typing and you see them make mistakes and then delete it and then type it again. Like it's such a
Yeah.
small thing, but I feel like anytime a show does that, it just adds that little element of believability because like normally, at least
Mhm.
traditionally in movies and shows, when they're typing, they always seem to get everything right the first time. And you just kind of like, come on, man, there's no way this guy is doing all these things and he's an expert typer as well. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
It irks me. It irks me. It's like for me, I don't care if people call it nitpicking, but if I see a character playing a video game in a show or a movie and they're just clacking the controller uncontrollably, it's like, no, nobody plays the fucking game like that.
Well,
Okay,
I mean,
just I'm talking about when. All right,
I
so
mean,
for example, if you're seeing somebody play Halo, who the hell
yeah.
is clacking the controller like? Let me give you an example. Who's playing Halo like that? Nobody.
Hmm.
Nobody's playing Halo like that. You can't play Halo like that.
Yeah,
You
you'd
cannot.
be
Your
going
character
real
will just be
quick.
shaking in one place.
Yeah, I mean that's the case of where they've just got somebody gave a controller, said act like you're playing a game. They probably didn't tell them which game it was, and maybe the
Yeah,
person not even that experienced with games anyway. So it's all right, whatever, just did it, and they just say,
I
yeah, this
hate
person's
that.
playing a point and click adventures. Like, wait, what? Yeah, small thing, but yeah, I get it. It's like again, small thing, but sometimes we see people play piano. And even though, like, I ain't trying to act like I'm some expert pianist, but even still, it's like sometimes you see people play piano in shows, it's like, you're not playing the piano. Like the way your fingers are moving, the way the note compares to the music that's played, is like, nah, you're not playing that.
Yeah.
You're not playing that. Come on. Yeah. But yeah, speaking of shows, I've been. In fact, speaking of anime, we spoke a little bit about anime just before the recording. But I actually been watching an anime on Amazon Prime called Dororo, which was recommended to me. It's an old anime. I can't remember which year it was, but it's not recent, and it's a remake. I think it's a remake of a remake, actually. But that's been pretty interesting. Been enjoying that. It's kind of awkward at times. In fact, it might even tie in a little bit to our topic later on, actually. But for the most part, it's a pretty interesting show and a pretty interesting concept about, this guy who made a deal with the demons so that his village could prosper. And in exchange for his village prospering, the demons took his firstborn child. They took like his skin, they took his arms, they took his legs, took his voice, his eyes, all this sort of stuff from him. And it was just like the baby was just left with like this skinless, weird looking Billy alive thing that the father then sent off to get buried. But a lady in charge of killing the son for no, I can't do this, put him in a boat and sent him in the river, to where he was picked up by this guy and then raised, and now this kid sort of 16 years later is on a quest to get his body back by slaying these demons. The problem is that if he kills all the demons, the village no longer prospers. So it's like that kind of moral dilemma between he's got like a little brother who's like he doesn't want to, he's his little brother, he doesn't necessarily agree with what his father did, but he also doesn't want his village to suffer and die either, right? So so it's quite interesting and I feel like it's quite an interesting concept. I won't give any spoilers and stuff, but that's just basic sort of setup of the show. It's quite short as well. Again? This was like 24 episodes and they're like 25-ish minutes each. So it's not one of these like long ass like 2,000 episode ones. I'm up to episode 21. I just watched. So I only got a few more to go before it's all finished.
What is it called again?
Dororo. Dororo.
Okay.
Yeah,
because I never heard of it before.
That. But yeah, it's pretty cool, pretty interesting. Like I say, a little bit odd and maybe a little bit creepy at times. But yeah, for the most part, it's pretty decent.
I mean, it sounds interesting. I wouldn't mind watching it, and I do have Prime.
Definitely check it out. Then definitely check it out. It's got some really cool visuals in there as well. All right then. So let's move on a little bit then to the pre-topic of Lizzo. So Lizzo put out a song called Grrrls. Grrrr, however many R's and Ls, right? And it's a pretty decent song, right? I mean, I like Lizzo. I enjoy her music, so no issues there. But it turns out one of the lines in the first few sort of opening part of the song, one of the words rather, in the opening part of the song, is a word that on one part of the country, one part of the world, is kind of a way of saying something, kind of cool, hey, you're kind of crazy in a cool way, right? Kind of getting wild in a cool way, that sort of thing, right? But in another part of the world, that same word is, I guess it has a similar meaning, right? But maybe more on the negative side, and is often used as a insult towards people who are disabled, or sometimes have like maybe mental disabilities. And well, actually, maybe that's not quite accurate. It's not necessarily used as an insult towards them. Well, maybe it is kind of, but I guess it's mostly used as an insult to somebody, comparing them to somebody with, say, mental issues in a negative way. That sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of used. So I know a person doesn't have any disabilities or doesn't have any mental issues, but I might call them that word as a way of insulting them by degrading that whole thing. I think that's maybe a more common way it's used.
Okay.
But yeah, in any case, it's more of a negative term in the UK, and I think Australia as well, and some other parts of the world is used more as a negative term. Whereas in America, not so much. Um, so when Lizzo put out the song, she had no idea about it. At least presumably, I mean, I doubt she did. It's unlikely, I think. But anyway, she put out the song. Was then informed that this word is offensive in some parts of the world. She was like, "Okay, cool. As you know, a black person, as a person of size, I understand what it feels like to have insults thrown at you, and as such, I don't want anybody to feel like I'm insulting them, and therefore, I'm going to change the lyrics of
Mm.
the song," and she did so. And actually, similar to what we were talking about a little while ago about how in the current world of digital media, once something is replaced, the old version doesn't exist anymore. So that's happened. The only way you could hear the old version is if you could find somebody who might have uploaded it on YouTube or something, but certainly not in an official capacity. You're going to hear that original version right now. If you go on any streaming platform, it is just that new version that's been changed. Um,
Yeah.
and that's of course Lizzo's right to do that. I think there's no. I'm not trying to be like, oh, she should never have done that. I'm not that guy. She has every right. It's her song, and she has every right to change it if she wants to. What
Hmm.
I find fascinating and what really interests me though is what does this mean for creativity and arts going forward? Because I have a lot of different thoughts on this. One of them is that okay, yes, she is her right to change it, and she did do so. Um, but when I think about creativity and some things that I put out, one of the things that I consider is that if I'm going to be authentic and genuine and true to myself, one of the things I have to accept is the fact that somebody else might find that offensive. If I express myself in a way that's authentic and genuine to me, I might use words or phrases or say things in a way that somebody in maybe another part of the country, another part of the world, or maybe just in general, I might say something that they will find offensive. And if I feel that what I'm putting out is um, the message that I'm trying to deliver, the feelings that I'm trying to deliver, the experience that I'm trying to deliver, if I feel that the words that I am using to create that experience, even if it is just one word that's causing the issue, changing that one word ultimately changes the experience. It might change it in a small way, and be fair, probably very insignificant way, but it's still fun. It still ultimately changes that experience in some way. So the question then becomes, how important is this word to your overall goal? Now, imagine in Lizzo's case, she maybe felt, okay, that word isn't that important. I can change it to something else. I can still do what I want to do. Okay, cool.
Hmm.
But what happens if somebody gets offended by a word or a phrase that is more important to the actual message than the experience that you're trying to deliver? What happens if another phrase is offensive in this part of the world, but changing that now means the entire song has a different feeling? What happens then? Are we still saying that I don't want to offend anybody and I'm going to change this song now, compromising your art? Or do you keep it as it is and then renege on your previous statement about not wanting to offend people? Because I feel like there's a point where, as an artist, you can't please everybody. You have to accept the fact that if you're going to be genuine, if you're going to be authentic, and if you're going to have your art maintain its integrity, part of that means you have to accept the fact that not everybody is going to vibe with it. Not everybody is going to like it. Some people are going to be pissed off by it. Some people might be super offended by it. There's all kinds of things. It's not what you want, sure, and it's not what you intend, but that's kind of how these things go. There's just way too many people in the world to try and please everybody. And a phrase that comes to mind is actually something that a friend of mine says. Shout out to Lena K, by the way. But she says, if you try to be everything to everyone, you'll ultimately be nothing to no one. And poor grammar aside, I feel like that's true. You can't be
Yeah.
everything to everyone. You at some point. I mean, yeah, there's going to be exceptions here and there who could pull out something and everybody loves it. Michael Jackson comes to mind. In fact, even Michael Jackson, not everybody loved, but I don't know, maybe 99% of the world did. But that 1%, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you ultimately can't please everybody. And I think as an artist, you kind of have to accept that as much as you don't want to piss people off. You kind of have to accept at some point, if you're going to express yourself in a way that's genuine and authentic to yourself, you might be using words and phrases that somebody else don't like. But changing that means that you're no longer being true to yourself, even if it is a small change. So yeah, so it's definitely an interesting thing. But yeah, what was it of that little ramble, Mr. Bundy? What did you think of that whole thing?
The thing is, I totally believe that Lizzo had no idea that, because I had no idea, and a lot of us here in the U.S. had no idea that it was that offensive or it was being used in that way. Like I said before, prior to us starting the recording, um, we don't use that word like spaz, and I'm sorry if
Mm.
people are
No,
offended that I
no,
just,
just
yeah.
go for it, man. It's
We
all
don't
good.
use that word
We don't censor
as a
here.
way of like as a way of like the R word.
Yeah.
Even the R word, like we started to pull back on that. The US, we use a lot of terms and words and all that, and sometimes we don't even know the full meaning behind it or how offensive it is. And we're starting to become more educated on that. And also, there's a cultural difference.
Mm.
I've seen comments on Lizzo's, because when I saw that tweet about her changing it, people were so happy and all that. But of course, you're going to have the people that are not ever satisfied with an
Right,
apology. They
right,
want
yeah.
more. They want more, as if you have to go and kiss their ass. People were saying specifically like, you already knew this word, and if you didn't know, then one of your representatives would have known. There's no way that you could not have known that. And that's such an asinine way of thinking, because you
Mm.
have to realize you're in a totally different country. It's not like Lizzo has on her team people from the UK specifically looking over her lyrics and then being able to tell her, hey, this word is actually this. No, it doesn't work like that.
Mm.
Sometimes you just don't know. And until you know, you're not going to know any better.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's what happened. And I don't like artists necessarily having to change their lyrics or anything, especially like I complained last time. I don't like the idea of losing their original copy.
Mm.
That's just my preference. However, um with her statement, her reasoning behind it, I support that. I like that she related to it. She said, how she's a person of color and an overweight person at that, and she knows what it's like. So I understand. But if we go back to like an artist like Eminem, right? Eminem is like a great example. Said a bunch of controversial stuff even for back in the day, back
Yep.
in the 90s, back
Yeah.
in the early 2000s.
Yep.
He
Yep.
said some outrageous shit, and people were on him. They tried stomping out his CDs, protesting and everything.
Mm.
Now imagine if Eminem had, reacted the same way. Like the moment you complained about something, he changed the lyrics. It wouldn't be the same Eminem.
Mm.
Slim Shady, all that. Okay. Most recently, there was Kendrick Lamar with Auntie Diaries, which is a pro-trans song, right? Um, he mentioned the word. He specifically said it, the F word, I mean,
Oh,
and
right. Okay.
he went into details about it. How like I'm paraphrasing here, but basically we didn't know it. We used it. It was a comic relief kind of thing. And yeah, he's right. In movies like I think it was The Wedding Planner. I might be wrong on that, but Vince Vaughn, they wanted to ban one of his movies because he said the F word. And I'm like, no, don't ban the movie. Listen, there are movies that are from its time, and you
Mm.
have to realize that back then they didn't know any better. And we should be proud of the fact that we've progressed so far that we flinch and cringe when we hear words like that now. Because back then, I'm telling you, when we heard that word, we didn't flinch. We said it so casually. We said a lot of words and a lot of things so casually, and we accepted a lot of things so casually. Seeing the progress should make you proud. I'm not saying you
Mm.
should be happy when you hear the word, but rather just respect the fact that it's from that time. These people
Mm.
didn't know any better. They weren't saying it out of malice or whatever. Now, the people who are saying it out of malice, they're still going to say it to this day. So keep that in mind. Like, it's a difference between somebody purposely using a word to hurt and harm and put down, or rather, ignorance, which is, you just don't know.
Mm.
And that's all it was. This whole situation with Lizzo, she just didn't know. Just like I didn't know. When I first saw that, I was like, "What?" Because when we say spaz or spazzing out over here, we don't even really use that anymore. Like, it's like an old kind of thing. We normally say tweaking now, you know.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah. I think I've heard that. I've heard that. Yeah.
yeah, it just means you're acting crazy. And when we say crazy, we don't mean like a solemn crazy. We're saying you're acting wild or whatever. Chill out. Like, you spazzing out for no reason. That, like, we'll say it like that. We're not thinking, oh, mentally challenged person, blah blah blah, all that. We're not even thinking that.
Mm.
So this was news to me. And
Yeah.
I can't speak for everyone in the US, so obviously there were some people in the US that already knew better, but that's because you were educated on that. Somebody probably taught you that, or you searched for that knowledge.
Mm.
Not everybody's doing that. Nobody's necessarily going over every lingo, every word that they heard, and trying to find out the deeper meaning behind it.
No, for sure. No, there's definitely something about you mentioned about sort of cultural differences as well. It's just how that goes. A word that's used in one way in one part of the world uh, could be used completely different in other parts of the world. And there's loads of examples of that, right? You know,
Mhm.
um, it's just how it is. So I do feel like, I mean, I will say that I was somewhat familiar with the word spaz in the American context because, I've heard it in American music before. So I had an idea that it wasn't necessarily being used in that kind of way as we might you say it over here, right?
Yeah.
Um, and,
I mean,
like,
just like what you guys, I'm sorry to cut you off for a second. It's just like what you guys call cigarettes over in the
right.
UK.
Yeah.
When I first
Yeah.
heard that, I was like, oh, hell no, what? It took me a
Yeah.
minute to
Yeah.
understand what you guys were actually talking about.
Listen, yeah, if you said smokes, oh, I'm gonna go smoke some fags. It
See?
means something completely different over
Yeah,
there than it does over here.
exactly.
All right.
Yo, perfect
It's yeah.
example. Nah, you hit it right on the head.
But yeah, that's an example of that, right? A word that just means something different in different parts of the world because it's just cultural differences and how you know people use words and society and everything else that goes into that. And if so, yeah, like we're talking about, being genuine. If I'm going to express myself in a way that's authentic to me, and I'm talking about cigarettes, for example. I mean, to be fair, I probably don't use that word in general anyway. But if I was somebody who was more colloquial, using that as a way of describing cigarettes, and I wanted to express myself in a way that's authentic to me, I might, use that word in a song or a poem or whatever, right? Because
Mhm.
that's how they authentically express themselves. The fact that that word is offensive in another part of the world, then it becomes like, okay, I understand that, but I still need to be genuine to who I am and to how I speak, right? You
Yeah.
know, so when you change that, even though it might be a small change, it's like now I'm no longer being myself. You know, now I'm no longer saying the things I want to say in the way that I want to say them. And I
Mhm.
feel like there needs to be an understanding of cultural differences because we do listen to music from different parts of the world. We do watch movies and read books and all these sorts of things from different parts of the world where people express themselves in ways that are, specific to maybe, not just their country, but maybe even their town, their small village where they might say things in a particular way that they don't use in other parts of that same country. But if they're not allowed to do that out of fear of how they express themselves in this small town in, southern, I don't know, Mexico, and they express themselves in that particular way, but then in the Netherlands, that word is really offensive way of describing something. So now they can't. You know what I mean? It's like we're connected in ways, but we are also distant in other ways. And I think one of
Mhm.
the ways we come together is by understanding those differences and not by demonizing people for those differences. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you use that word in a really cool way. It's not how we use it over here. But I understand when you say it in this context, you're not trying to be offensive. You're just trying to express yourself in this way because that's what it means in this particular culture. You know what I mean? If we're
Yeah.
not trying to understand that, then I think we're ultimately going along a path that degrades art. Because arts then just becomes so bland and spread out and so thin because it only gets to express itself within a very small area of words that have been deemed non-offensive across the entire planet. So you could only use, this small section of phrases and words now because these are the ones that have been deemed non-offensive. You can't step outside of that. It just seems like, I mean, I know it's somewhat hyperbolic what I'm talking about, and I'm certainly not suggesting this is what Lizzo intended, but you know what I mean? It's that kind of like, where do we go next with this once we decide that we're changing lyrics to suit people's sensibilities? You know,
Yeah.
what happens next? Where does that end? You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
I'm also afraid of it encouraging people to, harass artists each and every single time they disagree with a lyric, because they did
Mm,
try to do that to Kendrick Lamar, and thankfully, people came to his defense, and he didn't change it because he's just. I'm assuming just because he's that type of artist and he's very serious about his music. And also, what again, it wasn't used in a way
mm,
of like just freely saying it or to put people down or anything. The whole song is pro transgendered, and he was just mentioning that we used to use that word
yeah.
so freely without understanding the deeper meaning behind it.
Mm. I
So
think.
I just really don't want to see any artists succumbing to that. I don't want to see any changed art just because it offends.
Mm,
If it's something stupid, like you're just getting on the damn mic and you're just saying that word over and over and over and over to offend, to purposely get attention,
yeah.
then
That's
yeah, I
yeah.
just don't want nobody to pay attention to your shit. I don't want you to make any money, none of that.
Mm,
But if you're just, you happen to say it or whatever, or for whatever reason, I don't want people to just get offended and be like, no, you got to change it. That's not right. You have to change it now. Like, who the
mm,
fuck are you?
mm. Right, exactly. Exactly. Right. I feel like I would personally say that's what I feel it comes down to. I mean, I haven't heard of Kendrick Lamar song you're talking about, but ultimately he shouldn't have to change it. If somebody doesn't like what they're saying, they have every right to not like it for sure.
Yeah.
But to demand that he changes it because you don't like it, it's like, wait a minute, you know, I feel like there's always that point as a consumer. You cannot be, well, I mean, people clearly are, but you shouldn't have that feeling of entitlement that the
Hmm.
world owes you something. And if it doesn't deliver
Yeah.
that thing, that you get to go tell somebody that they must change. It's like, no, wait a minute. That's not the deal here. Like ultimately, an artist's job is to create songs that are, well, depends which artist we're talking about, really, I suppose. But, if we're talking about art in its truest form, is to create something that is authentic, that is genuine, that expresses an idea, a feeling. It's not necessarily supposed to make you happy. It's not necessarily supposed to, align with your feelings or you align with your opinions. It might, right? And there's nothing wrong with it if it that things that do, but that's not necessarily what it has to do. And sometimes the way to get an understanding of something is to go through that feeling of it being offensive and feeling uncomfortable and feeling like it hurts, and going through that to understand what somebody's trying to say. That actually,
Hmm.
yes, because I remember those times what you're talking about where people would use words like that just as a thing,
Yeah.
just as literally just how you talk, how you describe something you don't like. You know what I mean? You're not necessarily thinking about people specifically. You're just
Yeah.
like, I don't like it, so I'm going to call it that thing, right? And it seems wild now, but yeah, that's literally how he spoke back then. And
Yeah.
I remember thinking one time that there was no gay people in my school, right? Um, which is, I mean, there's lots of people we called gay as an insult, but I remember thinking that there was like no actual gay people in my school. That wasn't true. It's just the people who were gay at my school at that time would not have felt comfortable telling anybody that. And
Yeah.
thinking back to how we spoke and how we described things in that way, it's understandable. If you go into if you're already feeling something that most people around you don't feel, and then you go to a place on a regular basis and everybody, or at least most people, are describing things they don't like as gay, or or stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's gonna play some, you know what I mean, that's gonna be a mind fuck, right? You know what I mean, like, because you're already feeling like you're this thing, and then everybody's calling bad things that thing, and now you're like, well, how do I be myself in this place? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think about that now, like what we would have put people through there without even knowing, but that's how it was back then. So if he's describing, what's that song called again, by the way?
Auntie Diaries.
Auntie Diaries. I'm going to look it up. I've got to look that up, because if he's describing that as a way of how people spoke, and people now are saying, "Oh, that's offensive," or I don't like, yeah. without hearing a song, I'm thinking, yeah, because it was like that back then, So I'm gonna have to look that song up and listen to it, but yeah, it was like that. It was like that.
I would have just preferred people to react like a little more understandably, like to just educate her on it. See, the problem with people as a majority, or at least a good group of people, they got this entitlement, like you said, and they kind of just want to scold you. They don't want to educate you. And that's the problem with a lot of people. If you approach someone typically with an attitude and scolding them as if they're a child, it makes them more reluctant to go ahead and accept that change, to accept that adjustment. Someone like Lizzo, who releases all this positive music, and let me tell you, me personally, there's very few songs that I like by her, and it's just because her songs are so damn positive, it's so uplifting, and I don't like music like that typically. I just don't. I'm like the Grinch, and she's releasing Christmas music, basically. So for someone
Sweet
like
Grumpy, that's what we have to call you for that one.
So for someone like that positive, right? They're going to easily move and budge and do whatever you say. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, but I'm saying somebody like Eminem, let them try to tell Eminem to change their lyrics, which they did in the past. He'll say, fuck you. I'm not doing it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to double down. Now, next song is going to be even worse. And that's because you're trying to scold them like a child. However, let me tell you, someone like Elton John, he spoke with Eminem, and he explained to him what was going on and whatever, and they actually performed together on stage.
Yeah.
For I forgot which song it was, but either way, you can look it up.
Stan, I think.
Yeah, I think it was Stan too. And yeah, it was Stan. Yeah. No. Wait.
Yeah, because he did the Dido part. Elton John did the Dido part of that song.
Oh yeah, that is Stan. Yeah. So that was something where he learned from it, and as he moved on, he didn't completely clean up, but you did see a change in his lyrics a little bit, referring to things like that. Like before, it was more extreme, straight in your face, like a stab wound. He didn't give a damn. But I remember songs afterwards, he was still edgy, but not like that much. And it's because it was because he grew as a person, due to the fact that Elton John approached him man to man, like he's a grown ass adult, as he should. These people online, they typically just want to go ahead and see a person crumble, and like, they like that shit, and they don't realize it. They don't want to admit it, but they like that shit. They love a moment where they could go ahead and put somebody down, and they don't realize that they have a mob mentality. That's why you got people, if you go ahead and have someone like Lizzo apologize, it's not good enough for them. So I don't like that, and it pisses me off when I see it. I'd rather people just approach and say, hey, just so you know, this is what this means, and this is how it makes certain people feel, just so you know. And some people will go ahead and not like that much, but I don't mind that. You're educating somebody. You're trying to
Mm.
teach them. And I feel that's the purpose. That should be the goal. Teach someone why it's offensive, how it's offensive, and let them decide if they're going to change or not. If they don't change, don't fuck with them anymore. If they do change, then fine. Appreciate that. That's all.
No, indeed. I think yeah, I feel like the internet, especially like the sort of mob mentality you mentioned, it kind of creates this idea of power. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but I feel like people, there's a sense of power in there where you kind of feel if you could get enough people behind you saying something, you could
Yeah.
get somebody to apologize. You could get somebody to, in this case, change their lyrics potentially. You could get somebody to whatever, and there's a sense of power in there, and how you handle power says, as the saying goes, though, if you want to test a man, give him power. Like how people handle power says a lot about them. You can either handle it in a good way where you said, hey, actually, just so you're aware of something, such and such and such and such, or it could be like, how dare you? You should have known better. You should have done this. You're a moron. You're a this. You're a that. It's like, nah,
Mhm.
hold on a second. Hold on a second. Let's start it back a little bit. Let's start it back a little bit.
No,
Somebody
you're
said something
absolutely
that we're
right. It
unaware
is
of.
about power. It
Yeah.
is because I've seen even recently. This is what happens on Twitter. Somebody will make a post, be like, "Hey, remember this time when this person said this?" And they just
Mm.
want likes and retweets, and they want to be the person to say, "Yeah, I was the one to mention that. I was the one that reminded people of this controversial statement from way back when. Probably before I was even fucking born."
Yeah.
I've seen somebody try to do that with the voice actor of Goku recently, right? From Dragon Ball Z. There was
Okay.
a sound clip of him, joking around in the Goku voice, saying some offensive words and shit. And at that time, back then, it was funny. Things
Mm.
change. We learn
Yeah.
better, and we like we've been speaking about this whole time. I mean, talking about this whole time, we grow and we learn and we say, okay, that's not good. That's not cool. And we already
Yeah.
know why it's not cool anymore. So now, it may not be funny anymore. Or
Mm.
if it is funny, it's funny for that time, right? It's like, damn, that was
Mm.
fucked up. Like that. We don't go ahead and say, yeah, that's right. That's funny. Like,
Right. Yeah.
no.
Now you understand that how you thought back then is going to be different
Yeah,
to how you think now. And of course, because you're going to learn different things and more things, you're going to have different experiences. Your knowledge at, 15 years old is like this. Your knowledge at 25, well, hopefully is like a bit more like this. Your knowledge at 35, hopefully, you know what I mean? So you learn
yeah,
the things there's going to be things at 35, 40, 50 years old that you just did not know and had no clue about when you were 10, 12. You know what I mean? It's you've
absolutely.
got that much more years of learning, or at least you hopefully you should have that much more years of knowledge and experience. And when you have that, you can look back at those times and think, yeah, we were messed up back then. We were saying stuff that at the time we thought was funny or whatever because we just literally did not know better. Like literally did not know better.
Yeah,
Not even saying that as just a phrase, but you actually did not know better at that
yeah,
time. And now that you know better, you do better. Now that you know
exactly.
that how your words can affect people, you don't use them in those ways anymore. When you've had experiences with people and you see things and understand things, that's what actually one of the reasons. I know it's a little bit slightly off, but one of the reasons why I believe that's so important that everybody travels. Everybody travels. I don't think you have to travel all the time, but I feel like it's important that everybody travels. Step outside your town, step outside your city, step outside your country, step outside your continent, and see different parts of the world because it gives you such an understanding of how people live and how different societies get together and how different parts of the country live, how different parts of or different groups of your own city live, and it gives you such a good understanding of culture in general and not just like, well, I was right when I said this because that's what I knew then. And that I could
Yeah,
all but guarantee you, anybody who's like in their 30s or 40s and older, still saying all that nonsense now and still standing by it like it's the right thing to do, I could all but guarantee that's a person that has never traveled outside their town. You know what I mean? That's a person that's never traveled outside their town and probably barely traveled that much within their town. You know what I mean? Probably
Yeah.
just stayed within a small area, like majority of their lives. You know, maybe even all their lives, and they just have this one idea, and they just don't ever want to change. You know,
I mean, some people are just assholes,
or that.
and that's just something that we have to accept.
There is that.
You know, they don't want to change. They don't want to adjust. They don't want to correct themselves in any sort of way. Even if you come to them politely and say, "Hey, actually, they don't like that," you know, and you just got to go ahead and leave those people alone. Some people you can't change, and they're just, you know, I don't want to say destined, but it's just a given that they're going to be like this for the rest of their lives. And that's it. You just got to move on. You can't fix, quote unquote, fix everybody. Some people are just the way they are, and you have to go ahead and accept that and move on. You know, if you don't like them, keep them out of your life.
No, for sure. It's as much as you try to do the best you can, you gotta accept that some people are just where they are, and it's not necessarily your job to change people. You know, just understand that's who they are, accept them for who they are, leave them alone. You know, well, as much as possible, depending on who they are, it might be difficult to leave them alone. I get that. We might be talking about family members for some people, right? You know, people that you live with, and it might be a little bit difficult, but as much as possible, just be like, you know what, that's who you are. Yeah, and just like take a step back.
Yeah, I mean, if grandpa keeps saying the N-word, you know, it sucks, especially if you have, you know, black friends or a black partner. It sucks, you know, just don't bring them around grandpa. Unfortunately, you know, grandpa's not going to change. It's too late.
Grandpa is but there's no saying a fool at 40 is a fool for life. So it feels like that at 40. It's a good chance, he's not changing. Not impossible. Not impossible.
It is possible.
There's a good chance that's him now. That's just the door's open. When he changes, he can come to you. Until then, leave it alone. All right. Let's move on to the main topic now. And like I said before, I feel like the whole Lizzo thing kind of ties in to this main topic of, can something go too far? Can a video game go too far in its concept? And this is where I feel like I might even contradict myself a little bit from what we were just saying earlier, because as much as I do believe in, you know, creative freedom and artistic integrity, you know, and a person's right to express themselves in any which way they want to, even though that's ways I don't necessarily like or agree with or think are abhorrent or whatever. Like I said, I came across a game recently. By the way, I'm not going to say the name of the game because I don't want to inadvertently promote it in some way, because it was that off-putting. But this was a game that quite literally encouraged like rape and sexual assault. And I was like, on one hand, it's like on one part of my brain is like, I mean, okay, it's a game, it's not real people, it's just pixels, you know what I mean? It's digital. Nobody's actually being assaulted, nobody's actually being hurt. But then the other part of me is like, even though that's true, it's still presenting this image and this idea and this message of, you know, sexual assault or sexual harassment really being a good thing that women like, you know. And it's like that's such a horrible message to put out into the world, you know. And although, I mean, I know a lot of times people say think of the kids and that kind of thing, I would say I doubt many kids are going to come across this game, because it's not like a mainstream game or anything. It's really like one of these obscure games that nobody should be playing, right? So I doubt many kids are going to come across it. So my guess would be any grown-ups that play it should hopefully know that that kind of thing is wrong and not do it in real life, right? But it's still promoting it, right? It's still giving it a positive spin. And even though people, even if 100% people play it and 100% of people like, yeah, that's horrible, I'm not going to go do it in real life because they recognize it's not a good thing, it's still something in this world that exists that paints sexual assault as a positive thing. You know what I mean? And I'm like, should that exist? You know what I mean? That's where I'm like, I feel like a contradiction to what I just said earlier about you have the right to express yourself in any which way you want. But should something like that exist, is that going too far now? Is that actually a line that you just shouldn't cross? You know what I mean? What's
Yeah,
your thoughts on that?
I feel like if we're talking about specifically um, just games like that, it's tough because, like, on one hand, you know, and this isn't too far off topic, I hope, but on one hand, you have porn that has, the same kind of topics, but it's all a fantasy.
Hmm.
Either way, you're kind of promoting, like you said, you're kind of promoting the idea of like it's kind of accepted, but I think it's all depending on the individual that's consuming the product. You know, uh, for example, there are some people that are not so dare in the head that play games like Manhunt or GTA, and then they feel like that's not enough, so they want to do more. There was this one guy that was I forgot his name, but they call him Sky King, and basically he played a lot of flying simulators. And one day he was suffering with depression, among other things, as far as I know. And one day he actually hijacks a plane, or well, I shouldn't say hijack, but steals a plane and then flies off. Right. Long story short, he ended up killing himself in the plane on purpose. But you know, it depends on the individual because not everybody that plays a flying simulator is actually going to go as far as
Hmm.
to steal a plane. Not everybody that plays GTA is going to go ahead and steal a car and then hit some people or prostitutes or whatever. And not everybody that's going to play a game like that is going to sexually assault someone. So
Hmm.
it really depends on the person that gets the games. And unfortunately, there's no realistic way that we could determine who plays what. Like, for example, you could go ahead and actually put somebody through a whole extensive background search in some countries or some states where, in order for them to obtain a gun legally, right? But you can't do that for video games. You can't do that for porn and all that. Who
Hmm.
who wants to sit there? You want to play a video game and now you got to answer this whole questionnaire, submit all this personal information. Like, nobody's going to do that. And I don't want to see a future where people have to do that, you know? But at the same time, I don't want people to feel like they have to be on, stepping on eggshells when they want to do something edgy. Like the game Manhunt 2 was banned. I remember hearing a lot of that. It was banned in a lot of countries. They had to release a censored version. Even in America, they had to release a censored version. If I'm wrong, correct me.
Hmm.
But I wanted to play that game. I didn't finish beating part one because part one was fucking hard, but one day I will.
One day.
So, oh, but it's a really raunchy from Rockstar Games sort of game, and like somebody could see that, somebody that's not all there in the head, like I said before, they could see that and then want to do that. But not everybody, like, I'm not gonna go out and fucking kill people like that. I just want to play the damn game. And I want to see it for what it's supposed to
Hmm.
be. What these are, the creators who made this game, I want to see everything that they set out to set out to do, the way how it's meant to be heard, the way that how it's meant to be played, everything. I don't want it to be censored. I don't want anything held back from me, because I'm paying my money for this. So give me everything that you meant to give me. That's
Hmm.
it. I don't need any hand holding, none of that. I do like an option where in one of the Call of Duty games, I can't remember which one. I think it was Modern Warfare 2. It was I don't know how close
Oh
it was
no,
to
yeah, the
9/11.
Russian.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
They
I know.
gave you
Yeah.
an option to skip that. I feel like if you're worried, you should have options where even some games they'll say, "Hey, do you want to remove the blood, or do you could control how much blood is shown? You could have it be very gory or a little less gory, so that moderate level, whatever." implement things like that. Add options. Don't remove things. That's it. That's what I support. I support adding options.
Mm.
Uh, but again, like I said, for sexual assault, it's very, you know, it will be hypocritical of me to say that I want them to just remove games like that, but then keep in all this gory stuff and all that. But if I say it, it's so crazy because for a sane person, we already know sexual assault. What the fuck, It's fucking terrible.
Mm.
But when it comes to fiction and all that, is a different sort of thing. Like it's just that fiction. And the problem me personally, I feel is, again, it depends on the person because not everybody thinks that sanely. Not everybody is sane as us, where we know there's a difference between something that's fictional and reality. There are some people that get trapped in the mindset of an anime and they start acting like fucking anime characters. That's why I can't, and this might be me getting a little off subject, so I'm not going to even stay on it for longer than a minute. That's why I can't stand when people are so fucking determined to watch anime with subtitles, because they all of a sudden they think they're Japanese and they understand, oh, this voice acting is incredible. It's better than the fucking English. Motherfucker, you do not speak Japanese. Chill. But anyway, yeah, that's my opinion on it.
That's an aside. Just an aside. Hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. It's like it's such a interesting area because it's like on one hand, I don't think I've come across a game that's so violent where I'm like, oh, this is too much, right? And for the most part, games that have nudity or sex in them, I haven't really cared that much either. Even games that have been pretty sexually explicit, I've kind of been like, whatever, it is what it is. But then it's not until I came across this one where it's like, oh, okay, this is actually challenging my opinion now, because like it's I guess like what it comes down to, or maybe not what it comes down to, but what part of it is that we do view sexuality and sexual crimes different to how we view violence. Um, for example, you can have like explosions and blood and stuff like that in a movie or a video game, and it's not really much of an issue. But if somebody is naked and has their tits out, then it's like that's a problem. That's a problem, right? And so I suppose in different levels, the way we view violence, the way we view sex is always been different in society. So the fact that a super violent game could exist, and some people might say something, but generally speaking, you kind of like, whatever, right? But then a super, sexually violent game could exist, and the attitude changes. And if on one hand, it kind of feels hypocritical. If one can exist, why can't the other exist, right?
Yeah.
But then as another part, it's like, but it's not hypocritical. And why is that not hypocritical? Why is it that we're okay with one form of a fantasy, but not okay with another form of fantasy? You know what I mean? I guess that's probably going deep into like human psyche and human, and how we've developed over thousands and millions of years or whatever, right?
You know what?
But
I
there
think
is a
it's
difference, right?
because I think it's because people, when we watch the news, right, we could see some gory stuff. They won't show anybody getting their head blown off, but they'll show like cities being blown up, people running out of, like, for example, the Ukraine war. They show images of that, and I'm not against showing images of war because it's important, right? But basically, the news is always showing violence, showing everything kind of like of that nature, violent nature. But when it comes to sex, it's such a taboo thing. It's something that should be behind closed doors for most people. We don't even let women walk around topless, in most states.
Wait,
In
there's some
most
states already do.
instances.
What states do they let women topless? I mean, just for research purposes, you know. Respect to
Like
those.
I don't know which states allow
No,
women to go ahead and walk
I'm
around
playing.
topless. Oh.
I'm playing. I might look up later, but book my next holiday.
But yeah, like in most cases, women can't walk around topless, but men can. You know, and it's from that censorship that it makes it even more taboo. And taboo is something that makes when you go against the norm, when you go against that, it starts to freak people out because people are not used to it. Just like if we were to actually show like the most fucked up images of war, like dead bodies and blood and all that, if we show that on television, like as a norm, like eventually people will become desensitized to it. But initially, people will freak out. People will lose their minds. There's so many times where, and I hope this isn't too off subject, but this is just an example. There's so many times where I see people, they'll see something fucked up on like Twitter, right?
Mm.
Something very gory, and they'll be like, "Oh, that's not real. That's not real," because their mind can't accept that as real because they're not used to seeing anything like that.
Yeah.
And it's such a big difference between seeing something online, like, well, not online, sorry, seeing something in a video game as opposed to real life. Very
Yeah.
different.
100%.
Very different.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know who David Jaffe is?
No.
Okay, David Jaffe's a former game designer. He works on the original God of War game. And he put out a tweet some months back now where he asks a question: if a game tasked you with going into a room and just killing like black people, Muslims, Jews, transgender people, gay people, just all the marginalized groups, right? On his room, you just had to go in there and just mow them down with a gun. Would you do it? That was the question that he asked.
Yeah.
And yeah, he got a little bit of a flack from that. People saying, "How can you say that? How can you ask that? That's disgusting." And I mean, I was thinking about this, like, okay, in most games that we play, well, I'm not new, but certainly me anyway. But in a lot of games that I play, you just kind of kill people just randomly anyway.
Yeah.
Should it, and because you kind of do that, you go into a room, you shoot people, whatever, and because you do that, should it matter that now those characters are being described as black guys, Muslim guys, Jewish guys? Should that matter? You know what I mean? Like, and I guess it's kind of weird because, like, on one hand, it goes back to the thing. Well, it is a game. There's not real people. It's just digital numbers and whatever on a screen. It's just lines of code. Nobody's actually being hurt. Nobody's actually being killed. Nobody's actually being anything like that. And the only difference is that between this game and this hypothetical, I say most games, this hypothetical game is that in this hypothetical game, the characters were given a description.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But they are not ultimately black people because they're characters. They're in a game. They're not Muslims. They're just characters in the game. They're not Jews. They're characters in the game. So should it really make a difference? And I guess logically speaking, it shouldn't, right? But then it's like humans aren't always logical for one thing. But that's just facts, right? We're not always logical. And I guess because of that, when we see that description as now that we've attached an identity to these characters, it maybe brings those characters closer to ourselves, closer to humanity. And perhaps it's because of that description, or in parts because of that description, that it's now harder to go into a room and just shoot down a bunch of people. Whereas before it's like, whatever. It's just whatever, right? But now it's like, oh, that's is now a representation of a person now because they have a description. And I guess it's similar to any game where you play and where they have a character that you get to know over a period of time, and then there's a bit where it asks you, do you let this person die so that you can save your whatever, or do you know what I mean, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It makes it harder because there is that description that attaches it to a human thing that we can associate with. But it's weird because in the end, it is still a game. It's not real.
Yeah.
It's not an actual person. Logically speaking, it shouldn't matter, but it does.
Like, I feel like the question was very interesting, though. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Initially, when you like, my first thought was, why the fuck would you ask that? But the reason why I thought that was because I'm like, you're just asking to get, attacked, because nobody's gonna like today's climate is so like we were just discussing how people react online. The minute they see something offensive, it's like a damn mob comes after you. You can't ask controversial questions like that without expecting to get some flack. So, and that was my first thought, and that was the reason why I thought that. But it is interesting because, like I said, with that example of Call of Duty, that mission where you go into an airport and you have to kill everybody. You don't have to. You're not going to fail the mission if you don't shoot anybody. I've seen people complete the whole mission and they didn't have to let off one shot. That's it. You're not going to fail.
Thing altogether, that game.
Or you could skip it. But if they did have a game where they said only kill the black people, that would put you in a very awkward position, like for some people.
Yeah.
But if you had to beat this game, would you do it? Again, it's just a game. And I feel like it depends on the purpose of that. Are you trying to make people feel uncomfortable, and why? Are you trying to encourage people to just kill black people, or you're trying to, it depends on the creator's mentality and the purpose of that being in there. So depending on that will determine whether or not I support that freedom or not. I'll be against it if the purpose is just to go ahead and feed into, it's like a stress reliever, like, oh, you can't do it in real life, but you could do it in our game. If it's like that, then obviously fuck that. Because you don't want to promote shit just, giving people like a substitute, like, here, you can't do this in real life, but here, do it on this game instead. Like, no, fuck that. You got to erase that part of their mind, or at least try to. And sometimes it's, it's impossible, but you don't want to feed into it.
But having said that, though, I mean, I know there is kind of this thought, or I don't know what it call it, thought or theory or something, but it's idea that a person who maybe has the ideas of doing these horrible things in real life, but because they do it in a video game or do it in, say, a safe environment, for lack of a better phrase, they then don't go do it in real life. Like, I know when they talk about like sex dolls, for example, a lot of this discussion surrounding that is that, if you make a sex doll that's designed to look like a small child and give it to a pedophile, right? That they could then do whatever with this doll. I mean, they're not doing it in real life. And I guess I get the thinking behind it, but then part of me is like, but does it prevent them from doing it in real life, or does it just further encourage it?
Again,
I mean, we don't know because it hasn't happened, but you know what I mean? It's just that kind of like, where are we really going with this?
Yeah. Again, there's no real easy answer for that. Like, it depends on the person, because some people will be satisfied. Like, for example, some people will watch like fetish porn, right? Porn that's like, I don't know, water sports, right? But have no intention of actually engaging in that, right? But some other people will go ahead and they're not satisfied with that, so they go out and seek that. So it depends on the person. And for shit like what you were describing with the sex dolls, like, to the average person, you're gonna be having the same reaction, like, fuck that,
Mm.
right? But again, it depends on the person because you can't necessarily say, okay, we got to put this person in jail even though they never touched a child. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, is that okay? So it becomes a question of that. Or because it's like, it's almost like the show. I forgot the name of the show, but basically, it's like I don't even know if it's a show, but either way, just get this. There's a person that could see somehow see into the future, right? And basically, they start arresting people before they commit the heinous crime that they commit.
Okay. I mean, I haven't seen the show, but they did it in Minority Report. But okay, yeah.
Yeah. So is that okay? You know, do we go ahead and just the potential of it happening, arrest that person or lock that person or categorize that person as that? You know, that's what that situation becomes.
Mm.
So, I mean, you know, again, it goes back to the whole violent stuff. Like, if we had a game where you could simulate a school shooting, and I'm quite sure they got something like that out there
I
somewhere.
think a game like that exists, actually, yeah. I've
Yeah,
heard about something like that.
I wouldn't even be surprised. So, if you had like a school shooting simulator, right? Are we going to arrest every kid that potentially plays games like that? I mean, not potentially, but plays games like
Yeah.
that and could potentially become a school shooter.
Mm.
You know, it becomes this big debate back and forth, and you know, the most righteous thing to say is yes, of course, you know, of course. But again, if this person has no intention, like we can't tell the future.
Mm.
And that's the scary part about it. We can't tell. We don't know if somebody like because somebody who never fucking played games like that could go out and shoot a fucking school up
Mm.
anyway.
Mm.
It has happened.
And I guess if you're arresting
So
people who play the game, shouldn't you really arrest the people who made the game? You know?
it could go as far as that too. Because those are the motherfuckers that thought of it in the first place. So again, like with the example that you gave with the sex doll, do we arrest the people that made it?
Mm.
You know?
Yeah.
It,
It's yeah, I feel like there's as much as we've come as far as we come in humanity, there's areas that yeah, we just don't know, right, when it comes down to it. Morally we don't know.
yeah.
And I feel like there's always going to be those areas, no matter how much we develop, these moral areas that we just don't know what you do. Can a video game go too far? Can these sex dolls that they talk about, can they go too far? Can anything go too far? Because logically speaking, no, right? It's just
Yeah.
fantasy. It's not real. It's just playtime. Effectively, it's masturbation. You know what it comes down to. But we also know that it doesn't. That conversation doesn't really end there. You know, because what does that do to a person? Does it have the potential to alter somebody's mindset? And yeah, like you said, that very much depends on the individual. But in saying that, it's like you don't know what a person goes through for them to be susceptible to that kind of message. They can have the perfect life, or what we so typically deem as a perfect life, come across one of these things, and then all of a sudden everything changes. You
Yeah.
know, you don't know. They could be the person who has a life that's typically associated with somebody who's more susceptible to committing these kinds of crimes in real life. But they come across it, and again, everything changes, and you know, they're no longer doing it. You know, there's so much we don't know about people, about ourselves, about humanity, about life, about the beyond, and everything that's connected to how we even exist, right? And why we feel the things we feel. Why we get upset over something but not upset over something else, even though they're effectively the same thing or not that far off. There's so much in that area of illogical thinking and emotion and feelings and belief and morals and all these things that make us human that we just cannot explain,
Hmm.
but somehow we just feel like that's wrong.
Yeah.
We just that's wrong. I don't know why it's wrong. I just feel that's wrong. I can't explain why it's wrong. I don't know why I think it's wrong. It just feels wrong. And even though everything else about it, and especially to what we talked about in regards to Lizzo, is like, yeah, we shouldn't have be trying to tell people not to create art in the way they want to create it. We shouldn't try to stifle people's creativity. People should be able to create. But I do honestly believe that. But then it's like we go into this area where it just goes beyond that, and I'm like, it feels wrong. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
feels so off. And then I guess there's, like with everything, there's a balance, and there's an area where we can operate in between, where we're not too far this way and not too far this way, and there's this area in between. And perhaps with Lizzo, that area, that part is maybe more on this side, where it's like, we shouldn't be trying to stifle someone's creativity. And then perhaps with these games and these other things, it's like maybe more on this side, where it's like, maybe we should, you know, maybe we should start to stifle that a little bit, then try and stay in this area where we can push boundaries, but I guess it's pushing a boundary and not necessarily crossing a boundary. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you said, people do get emotional, and once any of us really hears about something repulsive, something very offensive, our natural reaction is just to push away and just you don't even want to really discuss it, because it makes you uncomfortable. Certain things. Even me, like after I've seen some fucked up shit and all that, and heard some fucked up shit, I'm still not, completely numb to it. So there's some things that I'm just like, I don't want to talk about it, don't want to hear it, don't care. Nope, don't want to talk about it. And I get that. I totally get that, because I experienced that. So I come to an understanding of it. Not everybody has an understanding of things like that, and they're not so what's the word for it? Basically, they're not open-minded enough to understand why they're feeling the way they feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I
So
think so. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, as much as feelings can make sense, but yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's all I have to say about that.
I mean, yeah, I think there's definitely things to be said about the idea of not being expressive enough and not being open enough with our feelings and emotions, and not maybe admitting that sometimes we like some of those toxic things, right? Sometimes we, let's if we're being really honest, sometimes we like a little bit of that toxicity,
Yeah.
and we're not really addressing as why we might like it, or why we feel how we feel about certain things, why we like this, why we don't like that, why when something good happens to us we sometimes push it away. It doesn't always make sense, and we're not always just talking about why we are the way we are. And perhaps
Hmm.
in there is some of these answers as to, how we've been raised and how we've been sort of taught to be around things, and what society, the messages that society has kind of delivered to us over the years we've been alive. And even though we may not always agree with some of those messages, fundamentally we do internalize them in some way. And especially things that have happened to you in your childhood, years later can still present how you respond to things as an
Oh,
adult.
definitely.
And we're not
There's a lot
always
of
unpacking that.
Yeah, there's a lot of trauma that people have gone through. A lot of people are traumatized and don't even realize it, because
Mm,
typically we don't really seek out help for mental health.
yeah.
See, it's normal to go ahead and be told, "Hey, go see a physician. Go see a physician about twice a year at least." That's the norm, right? But it's not normal as much as it should be to be told to, hey, you should go and see a therapist. Even
Mm,
if you're not struggling with the depression, it's good to go and see a therapist sometimes, just to make sure that you have an idea of how well you are in the head, because you could feel like you're perfectly fine and you may not be. There are certain reactions and certain things that we do in life and we don't understand completely why. We just accept it as this is who I am, this is how I am.
Mm.
But you should go ahead and speak to a therapist sometimes. And of course, if you go to a therapist and the therapist doesn't work for you, don't just say therapy is not my thing. Because just like a doctor, I've been to bad doctors before,
Yeah.
bad dentists before. I've had a bad therapist before. My first therapist was terrible, terrible, but it didn't stop me from seeking therapy. So I encourage people to go ahead and, seek out therapy. Like it doesn't put you on medication unless you see a psychiatrist and they say, I suggest that you get on this medication. You don't have to get on medication. But therapy is very good for a person to see, really see into their own psyche and come to a better understanding of who they are as an individual and why they are that way, or
Mm.
possible reasons why they are the way they are.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, I had a little bit of counselling one time. I probably should definitely be doing a little bit more, but yeah, certainly. When I spoke to a counsellor a little while back, and it was one of these experiences where the moment you started speaking, that I didn't realize how much I needed that sort of thing until I
Yeah.
started speaking, and then it just seemed to be like flowing and things just coming out of me, and it's like, okay, yeah, I
Yeah.
get why
And,
people
and
do
and
this now.
plus, it's different to go ahead and speak to a complete stranger that's educated. They're not just some random person off the street. There's somebody who's been, taught this. They spoke to who knows how many people, hundreds probably of people and patients and everything, and they had time to really study their work, their career. So you could trust this person enough to where, okay, I can give this a shot, right? And if it's not the thing for you, again, you can find another one.
Mm,
But I do feel like it's important because people don't really have that. People who never experienced it, they can never understand it.
mm,
You could go ahead and watch as many movies and hear as many stories as you want, but until you experience it firsthand, you do not know.
yeah.
And um, this also goes into like, because I've known so many people who, has all sorts of problems. Hell, I have a lot of problems too. Um, we, my mind is more like, I'm less. When I was younger, I used to just go ahead and write people off. I'll go ahead and cut people off and be like, nah, this person is this and that way. Fuck them, fuck that person, etc., etc. As I got older and had more experiences and everything, I slowed down. So I'm like, don't get me wrong, I still got a bad habit of cutting people off, but I do hesitate and I do, you know, take the time to really hear what they have to say and think about it and be like, all right, I could see where I'm in the wrong. I could see why possibly, they're going through something that's making them do this thing that makes me want to cut them off, you know?
Yeah.
And it's little things like that could go ahead and build a bridge between you and other people, not just necessarily this person that you have a problem with, but just helping you be a better person and helping you be better as having different relationships, like friendships, partnerships, whatever, you know?
Mm,
Um, so yeah, again, a big problem is mental health overall. Now, I don't feel like that's just an American thing. I feel like that's a
oh,
whole world
yeah,
thing.
no, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's a human thing, you
Yeah.
know. I think many of us. I think one of the problems though is that a lot of us, especially like, well, I say especially, I don't really know especially, but anyway, the point is, I think there's a lot of us in like say the 35 older age category, you know, or maybe like 30 and older, really. But a lot of us we're sort of raised in ways where it's like you didn't talk about things like mental health and in any kind of serious way, and oftentimes anybody who was seeking out like therapy or anything like that, they were considered like crazy and in a negative way
Exactly.
and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
And so it's very much like you just don't do that sort of thing. and because you kind of grew up that way of never really seeking help in that kind of way, when you get to your adult years and you feel like you're struggling with something, it's not the first thing that comes to your mind about getting therapy, or even just asking for help. Sometimes doesn't even come to mind. It can be very difficult. You end up taking on a lot of this burden that you don't really have to take, but somehow you just feel like you have to take, and it just ends up causing more stress and more anxiety, and just wearing out. And you know there was this thing it's on TikTok I saw going around, where there's one of these sounds that people kind of mime over and copy, and it goes around, and
Yeah.
it was like things like if you were born before, what was it, millennial? Not millennial. What's it called? Gen X? I can't remember. Anyway, if you're like in that kind of category where you're sort of 35, 40 year old older, right? And it was saying things like you weren't coddled as a child, and that sort of stuff. And it was kind of done in a way to say like, oh yeah, because we're so tough, that kind of thing. Like, it's kind of done in that respect. We weren't
Yeah.
coddled. We played out in the streets, and our parents didn't come look for us. It's kind of done in that kind of, that's how we're so tough now kind of mentality. And I guess there's some truth to that. But then the other side of it is that yeah, we weren't coddled. Our parents didn't come look for us. We often felt neglected. We would, if you had little brothers, you probably had to like raise them when when you were like 10 years old. You're probably like looking after your younger siblings and changing their nappies while your parents were out or something. You know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
although yes, there's good aspects of that in the sense that it teaches you about responsibility and this and that, which is good. But it also, from a very young age, it kind of puts you in a mentality of like, you are the adult, you are the responsible one, you're the one that if you mess up, everything fails. And we
Yeah.
don't really talk about enough of what does that do to a child growing up. Because yes, there are some good things that come out of it. You get older, you're a bit more responsible, you have a good understanding of certain things. But at the same time, the flip side is you take on so much, and not realizing that you can ask for help, because you kind of grew up not really being able to ask for help. You know what I mean? You kind of grew up
Yeah.
not being able to make a mistake, because if you made a mistake, bad things happen. So you take on so much responsibility and so much stress that you don't always have to take on, because that's all you know. You know what I mean? That's all you know. And what does that do to a person? So yeah, this is it could go both ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Me personally, I feel like one could also look at it as like sometimes it's a little tougher for people that grew up around this time, because parents don't even really have to parent their child anymore. You could literally just give your child a fucking iPad or some tablet, some shit, or even a smartphone, and they'll figure that shit out at a very young age. They'll figure that shit out, and you don't really have to parent them. I mean, yeah, a lot of us, we just sat in front of the TV sometimes, but you know, parents did have to engage more with their kids back in the day as opposed to now, because now there's so you don't have to worry about commercials. You know, you could literally just order food. If you don't want to cook, you could just order food. Yeah, you could order food back then, but now it's way more easier. You can just pull out your phone, order food. You could order groceries.
Yeah. Free
There's so
shopping.
many things you could do now, and you don't really have to do human interaction as much as it wasn't back in the day. Um, Everybody has, something to occupy. I mean, everybody has something to occupy themselves with nowadays. Almost everybody in the fucking household has a smartphone or a computer, laptop, whatever. Back in the day, it wasn't like that. And I hate saying it like that because it makes me sound old, but it's the
Well, it's
fucking
true.
truth.
It is true. It's
I didn't
true.
have a computer until I was like 14 or something. So yeah, man, it was different back then. I feel like I hate when people, of different generations want to shit on the other generation. I feel like we should shit on them for the right reasons, and that's not the right reason.
Yeah.
For me, I want to shit on them, not all of them, but for that whole I've been complaining about at least a few times already, that mob mentality on the internet when they have shit from decades ago, years ago, whatever, and they want to use that to bring that topic up. Oh, remember when so and so said this? Just to shit on them, and they could get a bunch of likes and retweets as if they get some big fucking internet reward. You don't. Half the time when I'm retweeting something or if I'm giving something a like, I'm not even paying attention to the person that posted the shit in the first place because I know that they got that from somewhere else. It's not like they remarkably thought of this one thing on their own. Most of the time, they got it from somewhere else.
Yeah,
just like TikToks,
or whatever, or saw it somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, just like TikToks with the damn sound. You can't even trust the sound anymore because you don't know if this is the original video that came up with the sound in the first place. There's somebody named Trey Rags. I fucking love this YouTuber.
Yeah. I know that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, funny as
He's
hell.
a menace.
Yo,
Trey Rags is a menace.
He's like from when I was growing up. That's
that
the era
guy
that he came from.
You know about Trey Rags, yeah? Okay, that dude is a menace.
He is funny as fuck. And they banned him on TikTok. But then you got people posting his videos on TikTok and they don't get banned. And some people think when they see his videos on TikTok, they think it's him. They think he got back on there, or they just don't know they got banned on there. So they follow that person. But it's not that fucking person. He doesn't even make money off of that. And he's not even doing any copyright takedowns as far as I know. And if I was him, I would have been doing that shit. You're fucking with my money. You're fucking with my name because I don't know if you're going to be promoting shit. Like when you get a popular tweet, sometimes people DM you and say, hey, we see that your tweet is getting a lot of attention. Do you mind promoting this product in the comments? And they'll pay you. You know, some people could fucking do that with his videos. And he may not even know about it until somebody tells him. And by then it's probably too late. Like that person already made like a couple of $100. And then you have to think about a whole copyright takedown process. And he's definitely not going to take somebody to court to get the money that he probably lost out of that. So it's situations like that. Like, just calm the fuck down. You don't have to rally, like do a whole rally here sort of thing to get everybody to be on your side and pay attention and and give me some likes and follow me because I brought this to you guys' attention. Like, I fucking hate that. I'm sorry to ramble on that. I feel like I kind of went off on a tangent, but yeah,
we did kind of drift a little bit off topic a little bit. So let's try and break. I mean, it's all connected. So it's not super off topic, but it is all connected. But let's try and bring it back to where things go too far. So I guess just from what we've discussed today, whether or not arts can go too far is always going to be subjective and down to each individual person. I think for myself personally, I'd like to say no, arts can't go too far. It can never go too far. You should always keep going. But then at the same time, in that token, I recognize that I am contradicting myself by saying that, I think that one's gone too far. So that it probably doesn't make much sense to say it that way, but I feel like it makes sense in my mind. That I could feel like art can't go too far, but at the same time, it's gone too far. It makes sense in my mind, even though it doesn't really recognize. It doesn't make much sense when I'm saying it out loud.
I completely agree with you. I feel like again, it's up to the person because, like, if somebody, for me, let me think clearly on this before I say it.
Sure.
Because like I don't want anybody trying to use something against me.
10 years from now, getting cancelled.
All right, fuck it. I'll say it. I don't like seeing dead bodies, right?
Okay.
When I was younger, I used to be able to see all this graphic shit. I seen people, hanged, beheaded, and all that shit. Because when I was a kid, I was like, oh my God, this is fucking nuts. And for whatever reason, I was into that edgy shit. As I grew older and I started to respect life more, it's become more like trauma. First off, I was traumatized by that and then had no idea whatsoever. I wasn't, because trauma isn't the same thing as what you expect. Like you're sitting in a corner shivering or something like that.
Right, sure.
Trauma is different things,
Yeah, it could be, yeah.
So the way how I would describe my trauma from that is that because I was exposed to that so freely, right? when it came to like sometimes I would just close my eyes, I'll see images of that,
Mm.
and we'll have and nothing will be going on that would remind me of that. It will just pop up in my head. And that's when I stopped watching videos like that. And even still to this day, and we're talking about over a decade later, I still have moments where I could visualize some graphic shit that I've seen. And it's traumatizing, right?
Mm.
So if I see art depicting something like as graphic as like an autopsy picture, for example, right? I say, yeah, that's going too fucking far. Oh, you know what? Perfect example. Wycliffe, right? You remember him?
Like if Sean.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, yeah.
He made a music video, and I'm not trying. I hate mentioning this shit because I don't want to promote it, but it's a perfect example. Just don't go look it up. Anybody that's
Okay.
listening to this, don't give that shit any promotion, please. Please. I know morbid curiosity is a thing. Just go against it this time, okay? Anyway, long story short, Wycliffe John, he released this music video, and they had a depiction, like a recreation of an autopsy picture of Tupac, right? Now, Tupac
Okay.
actually did have an autopsy picture released long, long, long ago.
Yeah.
And you can still, it's still visible, right? So for whatever reason, I forgot why, but I guess he was trying to depict that, you know, these people that, we looked up to, and I could have the message wrong because I remember when it came out, I was like, fuck this, immediately. But anyway, I might be wrong about this reasoning, but I think he wanted to show, basically it's like an anti-violence kind of thing. That's all
Right.
it was. Go against gun violence. This is what happens. And a lot of people jumped on him for it because it's disrespectful. You could have done anything else, but you did something that you knew would go ahead and garner that attention. And when you do that, yeah, you could go ahead and say, "Oh, well, I did that because that was the only way to." If it was just a stranger, you wouldn't pay attention to it. But you didn't have to do it with somebody that is so well known, because a lot of people didn't even know that Tupac had an autopsy picture.
Mm.
And I hate to even mention that in this podcast, but I feel like this is a good example, like I said, because it encourages it. Like, people are just curious like a motherfucker. Curiosity is a bitch, and people will look it up. And then once you see that shit, that's stuck in your fucking head. I don't care who you are, what you say, that shit is stuck in your head. And now this is how you remember that person. Not that that's going to be the only image that you remember them by, but this is going to be
Yeah.
one of the
Some
images
very
that's going to
prominent
come to
images.
mind.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So, and Tupac is a figure that people still think this guy is still alive. And I'm all for it. I don't, people still think Elvis is alive. So
Yeah.
why not? so so my thing is, when Wycliffe did that shit, that's when, a moment where I would say art went too far. So again, another person may see that and agree with him and be like, yeah, yeah. Even the person that probably came up with the concept, he might not have even been the person that came up with the concept, you know? So for them, art didn't go too far. For me, art went too far that fucking time. And I
Mm.
was like, fuck Wycliffe. Fuck him. Somebody please call 911.
But yeah, no, I feel like I get what you're saying for yourself because of what you've been through. You felt like that was going too far for you, but then at the
Yeah.
same time, for them, they're trying to create an image, and they probably feel like this was a really good way to create that image, not image, sorry, send a message, and they probably felt that was a really good way to send a message because Tupac was so popular, and even if people didn't know that he had that autopsy done, just the image of somebody that's depicted to look like Tupac in that position probably is a good way. I mean, I'm kind of assuming I haven't seen it. I don't think I've seen that video. But they may be thinking this is a good way to send this anti-violence message because we know what happened to Tupac and how his
Yeah.
life ended. So on one hand, it's like, yes, this is a way that kind of gets in people's minds in a really strong way of being anti-violent, and how you could end up, and even somebody as big and as, commercially successful. I don't know if that's the right way to describe Tupac, but certainly
I say
he was a
iconic.
popular artist. Apparently had very little money at the time of his death, but well, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah,
But yeah, very popular artist. Um, and that someone who so many people revered, so many people still to this day call the greatest rapper of all time. So many people still love his music. So seeing somebody like that end up that way, it sends a strong message, right? Or it has potential to send a strong message. But
yeah,
then for yourself and maybe other people who've been through similar things, you see something like that, and it's like that takes you to a place where you just don't want to go.
yeah.
Not just because of the message and what it represents, but personally what it does to you, and the mental space that it puts you in. So yeah, I think I understand what you're trying to say. And I guess it's similar to how anybody might feel about art that goes too far for them,
Yeah,
and perhaps
like
it doesn't
if
go too far
somebody
for
who's a
somebody
victim
else.
of sexual assault, if they played that game that you had mentioned before, it could bring up all
Right,
sorts of trauma. And in fact, yeah, the whole Tupac thing, that brought up trauma. Like when I was a kid, I've been looking up to Tupac since I was a kid. Okay, still to this day, I look up to him, and I've lived longer than he has. I
Mm,
still look up to him, right? I was one of those people when I was a kid. I was one of those people that believed that he faked his death, and that's because a lot of people are hopeful. We want our hero to get away, right? But
yeah.
that wasn't the case for him, unfortunately. And unfortunately, I was exposed to that picture when I was a kid. So, and it was out of nowhere. I was watching some fucking documentary that was given to me as a gift, and because they knew that I liked Tupac, and they were like, "Oh, watch this." They didn't watch it beforehand.
Mm,
They just gave me they just bought the video for me, and I was watching it. I was by myself, and the picture just came out of nowhere. No warning, none of that. Just out of nowhere, they put it on the screen. Bam. And that was the first time I've ever seen somebody other than in a casket dead, and especially in such a graphic way. Um, and this is somebody that I looked up to. So that, you know, when Wycliffe John did some shit like that, it brought back childhood trauma. You know,
yeah.
there's a different way that he could have handled that by, like, if he wanted to go ahead and do that, do it in a better way. For example, Tupac, and this isn't to go too off topic, but or stay too long on this, I should say. But Tupac lived for like 5 days after he got shot, right?
Yeah.
And those 5 days were agonizing for him. He had a finger removed. He had one of his lungs removed. Had multiple surgeries. He was waking up multiple times, trying, not really understanding what's going on.
Mm,
Sometimes he will just wake up and try to get out of bed and pull the tubes out of him. Sometimes he'll be waking up and he understands what's going on. He's crying. All of that. It was torture for those 5 days. Go into details about that or show that in a music video. Don't go ahead and show such a graphic thing just because that just says, pay attention to this. I went the furthest I can go for this. However, on the flip side, I'm talking from a biased opinion.
mm.
What if that is something that snapped people out of it and made them realize that gun violence is not the way? What if what he set out to do actually worked for some people that took in that? you know so that's why it's tough to say that I don't want artists to pull back, but at the same time I don't want artists to just do shocking shit just for the shock value. I want them to do
Mm.
it for an actual purpose. Don't just do something to shock people and get attention. Do it for a fucking purpose, more than just I want attention, I want money, and I want to offend people, or I want to shock people.
You know
That's
what?
what I want.
I think that could be the difference, actually. That what you just said there could be the thing as to whether it's really pushing a boundary or whether it's crossing that boundary.
Yeah.
And perhaps it's just what you just said about, oh, we just doing it for the sake of doing it with no real purpose, or is there actually something that we can learn from this? And perhaps in a lot of these examples, sort of some of the ones that we've talked about, they were just about shock value. They were just about, oh, this is going to get people going,
Hmm.
and there was no real. In fact, maybe, I mean, the way I define art is always having some kind of meaning, always creating some kind of experience, some kind of message. Even silly art has a meaning. Even that it doesn't have to be an important political meaning, but it has some kind of meaning to it, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps what's happening with all of this stuff is that there's no meaning to it, and it just exists for. And to be fair, I should probably say that I didn't complete that game, so I don't want to say that. Maybe in the end it's like, hey, don't rape people. maybe in the end it does that. I don't
Maybe he
know,
goes to jail.
but right, it could very well be. But it didn't seem that was the case from what I saw of it. It didn't seem that's the direction they're going in. But maybe. But let's assume that it doesn't for now, or there are at least things out there that don't have that kind of ending, and it just exists for the sake of trying to shock people or trying to be look how cool we are, and doesn't actually have any kind of meaning. And perhaps that is when it's going too far, when the art itself stops being art and starts being just gratuitous.
Yeah,
Perhaps that's when it goes too far.
man. And what's crazy is that we're gonna see way more crazier shit in the future. You know,
Most likely.
and plus,
Yeah.
as we are becoming the older generation,
Mm,
we're gonna be looking at these motherfuckers like, what the fuck?
bruh.
Which is really weird because the generations after us are becoming more sensitive. Like that's what we say, right? But there's always going to be this side where people are pushing the boundaries, something that you have to go further than the people who came before you. There's always
Mm.
people pushing that. So it's weird. It's like again, on one side, more sensitivity, on the other side, more brutal.
You know what? People say this, and this actually might be a little bit off topic as well, actually. But people say about people becoming more sensitive and that sort of thing. I guess there is truth to that, but I'm not sure that's a bad thing. Because
It's not. I mean,
yeah,
it
because
depends.
I feel like a lot of people now, a lot of the younger people now, are not putting up with the bullshit that we put up with, and maybe our parents and grandparents put up with. You
Yeah.
know, I know, for example, this tends to come up like a lot of times. People say like marriages today don't last as long, and marriages were more successful back in the day with the older generation because they lasted longer. But then when you speak to people from the older generation, parents, grandparents, and things like that, they would talk to you about putting up with abusive behavior,
Yep.
multiple infidelities, beatings, manipulation. You know, a lot. They spent a lot of time being miserable, and
Yeah.
although the marriage itself lasted a long time, I don't know if I can call that successful. you know, and then today it's like, okay, there's extreme where somebody gets divorced because they don't like the way you tie your shoelaces. I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't happen. That's the more extreme side. But typically, it's like, look, people are just not willing to put up with being abused. And, they're not willing to put up with being beaten. Not willing to put up with somebody trying to control them and manipulate them. And if a lot of relationships end because of that. And I'm like, I say that a marriage that lasted 10 years, where they were at least happy through 90% of it, would be I'd say that's a much more successful relationship than a marriage that lasted 60 years where you were miserable through 90% of it. You know, so I just feel like people now, by and large, younger people now, for the most part, are just not putting up with as much bullshit as the older generation put up with. And yes, there's the extreme side of it, but for the most part, I'll say that is a good thing, where people just say, you know what, I'm just not going to put myself through that kind of misery.
Yeah. I've actually had family members that were in, um, you know, abusive relationships, marriages. I mean,
Mm.
and they got a divorce and all that. So yeah, I'm proud of like how people are becoming less tolerable of certain shit. Just like transphobia. Like
Mm,
I don't like that shit. But not. But here's the thing where sensitivity becomes a problem when people are overly sensitive. And what
yeah.
I mean by that is like not everything is transphobic, not everything is homophobic. For example, this is kind of old news or whatever, but there was this one time where you remember the singer Genuine.
Yeah, yeah, I remember him.
So he was on a reality show, and
Oh,
because he
okay, I
didn't
think I
want
know
to
what you're talking about.
kiss,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I think I know what
because he
you're talking
didn't
about.
want to kiss a transgendered person, everybody called him transphobic.
Mm,
That's not the case. Just like if somebody doesn't want to date a certain ethnicity, that doesn't make them racist. It's just a preference. You have to respect that boundary. If this person does not want to do something or whatever, they're not rejecting that out of malice. It's just what they prefer. We can't go ahead and force people to adjust and do certain things and say certain things just because, we feel a certain way about it. For me, I'm perfectly open with transgendered people and all that, right? I don't flinch or anything. I may have a friend who doesn't feel the same way. Now
mm,
they're not going to go ahead and be transphobic. Like transphobia would be, oh fuck them, they're this and that and this. That's hatred. That's malice. That's transphobia. But you can have somebody be like, oh nah, I'm cool. That's just a preference. You got to know the difference, and you can't go ahead and be overly sensitive and just call transphobia on everything, because then you lessen the impact of what it actually means
mm.
and the power behind it. It should be used when it's supposed to be used. You can't abuse that, because then you lessen the impact of it, and once that happens, people don't take it seriously.
Yeah. I
And
wonder.
that's what. No, sorry, go
No,
ahead.
no, it's okay. I thought you'd finished, but you hadn't. It's cool.
Once you lessen the impact and everything and it loses its power, then you're setting back all this progress that you've made. And I feel like for transgendered people and gay people, they've made so much progress over the past few decades, past couple of decades even. No, the past few decades, yeah. They made so much progress, and they're still making progress. And there's still some obstacles in their way, just like, on the flip side, a little more escalation, race.
Mm,
There's still some progress with race that we have to overcome, and that's
yeah.
not just black people, just like Asians, for example. So don't, and just like that, like to relate with race for a more understanding of some of us who are not really relatable with, the LGB, sorry, the gays and the trans
The
and
gays.
queers, uh, and lesbians
Yeah.
and all that.
LGBTQIA
Yeah, thank you.
plus. I think. Oh, if I've got that right, then I want my card. If I got that right, somebody send me my card. Somebody send my card. If I got it wrong, then my bad. Sorry.
But just like with black people, we can't call racism on every single goddamn thing.
Mm,
Shit, and we can't be, and this might get me lose me some black points, but fuck it. We can't go ahead and say there's no reverse racism. I'm against that. I feel like I've met people, all right, black people specifically, that were racist against whites. Racism is racism, and that's how I feel. I don't give a fuck what anybody says about it. That's how I feel. I feel like, yeah, you could be racist against a white person, and there could be reasons behind that. Just like I know some legitimate reasons. Well, I don't want to say legitimate, but I understand it rather. Reasons why some white people would, be racist against black people. For example, I used to have a friend. I'm not going to say his name, but I used to have a white friend back when I was younger, and he used to tell me, almost every goddamn week I'm getting jumped by these black kids, and I could understand, if I was in his shoes and I'm getting jumped by black people, and then I hear my white relatives saying, "Oh, this and that, and that's why they do this." I can understand why somebody like that would become racist. You get what I mean?
Yeah, I
Most
think I know
black
what you're
people
trying
don't
to
want to.
say.
Well, not even most black.
Yeah, I think I know what you're trying to say. But I would say that, I mean, I'll just go back to a genuine incident though. Like from what I remember, the lady tried to kiss him without telling him or any kind of indication, and just tried to kiss him, and he backed away, and that's what caused that issue. So it was more like, I guess, more of a boundary thing that was being crossed there. Um, with what you said about racism, though, I mean, yeah, if you're a white kid and your experience is like every week some black guys beating you up, um, then yeah, I mean there is a correlation between your thought process. That being said, I feel like there is a point where you can't put everything on your own personal experiences. And what I mean by that is, okay, you've had the unfortunate experience where, or let's say this white person has the unfortunate experience where, every week he's getting beat up by a black person, but even still, there has to be the understanding that not every black person is a mugger. You know what I mean?
Oh,
It's
of
just
course,
that
of
is that
course.
person's unfortunate experience. So
Yeah,
there's a
of
point
course.
where it's like, okay, I get that's happened and that's not good, and we're not going to try and justify that. But to then say, well, all black people are such and such, there's a different stretch. And maybe as you're a younger person, you might allow it because, like, like I said, we don't know any better. But saying when we start getting to your adult years, it's like you should know better. And it's unfortunate that's happened to you, but that also doesn't excuse an attitude that demonizes an entire race because of that experience either.
Yeah, I mean, what this guy that I brought up, that I used to be friends with, he didn't like he wasn't racist against all black people, but as far as like naturally, he would have those tendencies. Like he would naturally assume, or be aware or act a certain way around black people because of that experience. But yeah, of course, what you're saying, of course. But when I say that I understand where he's coming from, is I understand why he ended up having that mindset.
Mm.
And it's like, even though I don't agree with it, I understand it, and I feel like that's something that people need to go ahead and overcome. It relates to what we were talking about earlier. Being open minded. It's difficult to try to comprehend or give that leeway or anything. We don't have to sympathize with the person, but
Mm.
just understand. That's
Sure.
it.
Yeah.
Understanding is not sympathy.
Sure, no, 100%. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's where I feel like people kind of mess up as well. Just because you can understand how something can happen doesn't mean you agree with it or support it or justify it. It just means you understand how that came to be. But I guess the next step is, where do you go from here? It's like, okay, I
Exactly.
understand why you think this way. Where do we go from here? You know?
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, then. Well, that was man. I mean, I figured that that the topic of how kind of game goes too far could be a pretty interesting to discuss. But who'd have thought it would take us on a journey of like mental health, racism, homophobia, transphobia, um, sensitivity, therapy. We covered a lot under this kind of game go
Yeah.
too far.
I think
But
this is going to be the
it's
first episode where you have to add like trigger warnings for people.
but yeah, I mean, I think it is all connected in some way, though, whether directly or indirectly. I think everything we mentioned, everything we talked about, is
Yeah,
all
I
connected
don't feel
because it's
like
all
it was
part of
random at
the
all.
all related to the human psyche and why we think certain things and why we have certain opinions and certain feelings towards one thing and not other things and so on. But yeah, it's definitely a big subject and maybe one we might have to revisit under in another time, maybe on a slightly different topic, not topic, what's the word? Like something different angle.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot to be said under this whole banner. Can it go too far? Should it? Could all of that and different viewpoints on that. But I think for now that might be a good place to wind up and wrap up. Is there anything else that you'd like to add in or mention?
We said a lot, and,
Mm,
and it's crazy that like it's just like you said. There's a lot more to say, but we said a lot. We said enough, and people could go ahead and explore the subjects their own way. and form their own opinions. We just hope, at least I hope, and I'm quite sure Bandit hopes, that we didn't, you know, disrespect anybody, that we didn't offend anybody, and that you understand that this is just a discussion between two people that, you know, they have some years in life, and we speak on our perspectives of that life that we lived. So of course opinions may vary. Just understand that there's no intentional there's no intention to actually offend anybody. There's no intention to put anybody down. um and that's it.
Yeah. No, indeed. I mean, I would say in general, like I don't set out to offend people.
Yeah.
Although I think, like I said before earlier, it's like sometimes when you're putting things out into the world in any kind of creative or expressive capacity, you know, if you're going to be genuine, you kind of have to accept the fact that somebody might not like what you're saying, you
Yeah.
know, and that's part of it as well. So, but yeah, it's not my intention to upset people or to, you know, piss people off. And certainly, in fact, it's similar to what we were saying before as well about art and, you know, gratuity and, you know, trying to have some kind of meaning to it and not just saying it for the sake of saying it because, you know, you're just trying to, you know, get people riled up and oh, that would get them going, and, you know, and you don't have any kind of meaning, no message, no feed, just nothing. It just exists to shock and piss people off. And yeah, I ain't about that life.
Yeah.
I ain't about that life. Hopefully we've discussed a few things to give this some kind of meaning, or at least give people something to think about, you know, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah. But yeah, yeah, I think that's going to be the place we wind down. So thank you to everybody who's watched and or listened. And till whenever, if ever, peace.